Story 1. Freshly baked croissant from a small Paris bakery at sunrise, still warm, flaky, and somehow tasted like actual happiness. Story 2. My late grandmother's butter chicken. I watched her cook it hundreds of times but could never replicate that exact taste. I think she secretly took some ingredients to her grave, the sneaky woman. Story 3. My grandmother lived through World War II in the United Kingdom. She would collect roadkill on occasion because it was what she did when food was scarce during the war. As a child traveling to the beach, she pulled over and picked up a recently deceased pheasant. I was disgusted. To this day, dinner later that evening was incredible, meaty, packed full of flavor, with a super rich broth. I could not believe it. To this day, I have never had a meal like it. Story 4. Truffle mushroom pasta at this tiny cafe tucked into a side street in Rome. I swear it was life-changing. Creamy but not too heavy, mushrooms cooked just right. Story 5. I walked into a random bakery in Paris one morning while exploring near Sacré-Cœur and bought a lemon meringue tart. Not sure why I bought it, as I am not a huge fan of the meringue, but I bought it and sat in a park near a metro station. It was the best pastry I have ever eaten. The pastry was buttery and crumbly. The lemon filling had the perfect amount of tartness, and the meringue completed the flavors in my mouth. Since then, I have not eaten a lemon meringue tart. I feel like nothing would compare. This was in 2018. Story 6. My great-aunt, who passed away, made an incredible chicken soup with perfectly diced carrots. She came to America when she was 15 from Hungary and worked as a cook for a long time, constantly sending money back to her family, many of whom were killed in the Holocaust. We visited her every other Sunday in Queens, New York, and my dad always brought her flowers, even though she told him not to. He never listened. She was his mother's sister, so this was a way to keep her memory alive since she passed much earlier. He wrote the recipe down, but it has never tasted the same. The broth had the richest chicken flavor I have ever had, with a deep golden hue. I really wish I had been older at the time to watch her make it myself in the kitchen and take notes. I dream about that taste often. I miss and love you, Auntie Tilly. Story 7. Mom's fried chicken. 9 people at home, 2 adults and 7 kids. Chicken was always the cheapest thing at the store. It was so good. We didn't mind having it 5 days a week, and the gravy she made with it was amazing. She would save that gravy, and on cold days, she would make us cornbread, slather that gravy on it, and we'd be standing at the bus stop with warm bellies. Obviously, she learned cooking from her mom, who used to make us homemade blackberry cobbler when we visited the farm. Ice cream fresh made from cow's milk. Story 8. I need to preface this by saying I went to Birmingham, Alabama for my job. I'm from California, and the food there contributed to me gaining about 8 pounds in 2 weeks. I literally ate barbecue 2 to 3 times a day. I had to go to urgent care when I returned home because I was having trouble breathing at work. Baked potato from a place called Saw's Barbecue was almost grotesque. It was the size of a football. It had butter, sour cream, chives, cheese, barbecue sauce, pork, and chicken. I still dream about this potato. I bought a hat there, and every now and then someone will point it out and say they've been there. I get so excited to talk about the potato that almost did me in a decade ago. Story 9. I was at a restaurant on the Puget Sound. The waiter came up, and I asked what the fish of the day was. He said, "One moment," and got our drinks. When he returned to the table, a pontoon plane had just landed. He leaned over the railing and yelled, "What did you catch?" The pilot yelled back, "Some beautiful Copper River salmon." It was amazing. Story 10. The seafood stew I had in Rome was from a street booth on Via Veneto. It was like the whole ocean in a bowl and came with warm, crusty bread and butter. My goodness, it was delicious. Story 11. Gnocchi at Mama Rosa's in Sorrento, Italy. This authentic family-owned restaurant offers gnocchi prepared flawlessly, followed by a shot of wonderful local limoncello. Story 12. Deviled eggs made by my English teacher. It was New Year's Eve, and he invited my 2 friends and me to his house. I brought a pie and he loved it, but he suddenly brought a lot of food: turkey, Here in Mexico, it is common to eat turkey on New Year's Eve, filling, mushrooms, and those deviled eggs. My friend, my sister, and I ate those eggs as if they were the last food we would ever eat. They were amazing. I have tried to replicate the recipe, but I could not. It was his personal touch, I suppose. We still talk about that evening. My sister always remembers it. I have seen the man twice since graduation, and I always tell him that his food was the best. Story 13. A lobster and potato pot pie baked in a creamy cheese sauce made from real cheddar cheese, eaten in a small roadside seafood shack in Nova Scotia. A bonus was the newspaper-wrapped smoked fish they made out back that my dad bought as a snack for us on the road afterward. I have been chasing culinary nirvana ever since. Story 14. There was a place in Hawaii that had the most amazing tasting tomato sauce I have ever tried. It has been a couple of decades since I had it, and I feel sad every time I think about it. I really wish I could find a recipe that was close, but I have not. Story 15. My father's version of Puerto Rican rice and beans, every family's is a little different. And my mother's chicken marsala with mushrooms and pasta. Is it redundant to say with mushrooms and pasta? Is it always served that way? I've never had it at a restaurant or seen anyone else try to make it for me, so I really don't know the traditional way of serving it. I just know that I would fight someone much bigger than me for a plate of both. Story 16. Daffodil cake my grandmother used to make. I think she put so many eggs into it. She had one of those old bowl mixers that would cost $2,000 today, but they all had them from the Savings and Loan Club. Story 17. I was once in Italy, in a small village in the mountains. I lived in a hostel where a couple of young men ran the kitchen. One day, we walked down the mountain to another village and back up again. It was a long walk uphill, but it was worth it. When we came back to the hostel, the men had made pasta with mushrooms, cream, and spinach from scratch. They even grew their own mushrooms and spinach in their garden. It was absolutely delicious, by far the best meal I have ever had. Story 18. My grandmother's eggplant parmigiana. I make a pretty good version, and I have eaten it in several good restaurants, but nothing comes close. Story 19. Lobster tails in butter sauce. We do not eat out very often, but if it is a special occasion, this is my special occasion treat. Story 20. Picking raspberries at my grandfather's house. They were warm from the sun and perfectly ripe. Nothing bought from the store has come close. Story 21. Roasted warthog is absolutely delicious. It tastes similar to pork but is even juicier and richer. It was roasted over an open fire. Story 22. When I was on vacation, I got chicken paprikash at a random German restaurant, and I swear it is the most amazing thing I have ever eaten. I have been chasing that experience ever since. I have tried to make it multiple times, and while all my friends say that I have done a good job, I know deep down that I cannot match what the old German lady did, and it bothers me. Story 23. There was a restaurant in Singapore that I ate at about 13 years ago, and I never forgot it. It was a rice bowl with steak, foie gras, and kimchi on the side. Story 24. Maybe not the best thing ever because that is too hard to think of, but I have never not enjoyed a piece of toast and butter. It never misses. Story 25. A tuna melt sandwich from a local sandwich shop. Overpriced, but totally worth it. Oh, and beef tartare in Old Montreal. Should have typed this first. Story 26. Nearly everything my wife makes. Lobster and many seafoods contain that umami that sets my soul on fire. Back in the 1970s and early 1980s, when I was stationed overseas in Guam, there was a Japanese restaurant that served real sushi and steaks. It was so good, I have never had that taste again. My wife has tried to replicate the slaw but has never gotten it quite right. Story 27. Pink peppercorn Mexican ice cream. Some delicately fried grouper from the Gulf. Guava sauce. My mom's Italian white bean soup with crusty buttered bread. My dad's shrimp and grits. A little bit of sweet Italian sausage from the farm with polenta. A swirl of tomato sauce, sautéed arugula, and sprinkled with Formaggio Parmigiano Reggiano Stravecchio. Kellogg's yellow, Cherokee purple, or green giant tomatoes on bakery Gruyere bread with mayonnaise. pan-grilled in olive oil as a sandwich. I think nothing I have ever tasted is better than the last item. Story 28. I was at a bar once and their menu had a barbecue pulled Gouda macaroni and cheese. It was incredible. Next time I went, they had taken it off the menu. Story 29. Bun fit nuong with shrimp, pork, and egg rolls. Best if paired with spring rolls or summer rolls and peanut sauce. Apologies to my dear friend who is allergic to peanuts. Story 30. My wife's banana bread is the most amazing thing for me. I do not even like banana bread, but the buttery salty edges and the dense sweetness of the bread are life-changing. Story 31. I was once invited to have dinner at a restaurant that was closing for good. The person who invited me was a close friend of the owner and a customer. It was a private dinner for close friends, and later I found out it was a pitch to invest in his catering business. When he asked me what I wanted, I said, "What would you order if it was your last meal in a restaurant?" "Bring me that." He looked pleased and brought me something special. I don't know what it was, but it was the best meal I ever had. Story 32. A peach from a roadside stand in Washington. It took 2 full-sized paper towels. It was so juicy and made my glands pucker under my tongue. No peach has ever been good enough since. Story 33. Lamb chops on a dinner boat tour of San Francisco Bay. Prior to that trip, I had been a vegetarian for 3 years. Story 34. This is not high-end, but when I think of my favorite, most delicious thing, it always ends up being a hot fudge sundae. With real whipped cream, real vanilla ice cream, and hot fudge super thick and heavy. And yes, I will take some crushed pecans and on top a cherry. Thank you very much. I could literally have this every day. Story 35. Dessert. My grandmother's peach cobbler with my grandfather's homemade peach ice cream. Beef. Prime rib from House of Gerhard in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Chicken. My rosemary and lemon roast chicken. Duck. Almond pressed duck. Pork. My mother-in-law's breaded chops. Bread. My buttermilk cornbread. White, not yellow, using my grandmother's recipe and the cast iron skillet she gave me. Also, a version with diced jalapenos. Italian dish. Sicilian ravioli from Fellini's Italian restaurant in Nevada. Salad dressing. Made from scratch creamy garlic dressing from House of Gerhard. Vegetable. Green beans. My grandmother's homegrown beans cooked in a pressure cooker with a whole white onion, 2 garlic cloves, and 2 strips of bacon. As you can probably tell, I am originally from the South in the United States of America. Story 36. I went to brunch and ordered the steak and eggs. It was next level. The steak, the potatoes, the sauce, the perfect sunny side-up eggs. I didn't stop talking about that meal for 2 weeks. My husband was annoyed, but when we went back, it was no longer on the menu because of the timing in the kitchen or something. I asked and she started to explain. I was grieving the loss. Story 37. One of my father's friends is Samoan. When I was 10, he made a dish with fresh seaweed prepared almost like pasta, along with amazing pork. I can still remember the taste 15 years later. It was the best thing I have ever had. Sadly, I have never had it again and cannot find anything close to what he made. Story 38. There was a bakery in the Ballard neighborhood of Seattle called Café Bisalu. The original owners made seasonal danishes with whatever fruit was in season. In midsummer, they had a nectarine Danish with perfect Eastern Washington nectarines that was so delicious I immediately felt refreshed. There are probably objectively more delicious things I've ever eaten, but for some reason that Danish just stands out. It was so good, super flaky pastry, mascarpone filling, with a big juicy slice of nectarine. Perfect. Story 39. Recently, it was the tacos from a small hole-in-the-wall place in Cozumel. Blue corn tortillas griddled to the perfect crispness around the edges, tasty filling, and just the right amount of heat in the red and green sauces. Surprisingly affordable too. Simply amazing. I am tempted to go back just for those. Story 40. One of my friends took me to a 5-star restaurant where they served steamed or cooked pineapple seasoned with spices. I am telling you, one bite will send your taste buds to heaven. It was so rich and hot that it almost hurt my jaw to eat it. I have never tasted something so rich and flavorful in my life. Story 41. A true, perfectly cooked steak. Filet mignon preferred, but just about any steak, with an incredible garlic butter topping or a creamy cognac sauce. I almost always take a bite of my steak first because one knows a great steak needs no sauce. Story 42. Some truffled beef dish in Pienza, Italy, 2022. The shaved truffle was thick enough to choke a horse. A local gave us the tip to visit this place and try the dish. There is a good chance it is still there, and I will return. Story 43. My ex-fiancée made me burnt butter gnocchi, and the effort made it the best tasting. I miss that man so much. Story 44. A pear. I don't know what kind it was, and I've never seen it since. It was a legitimate delight in food form. My eyes rolled back in my head, and I moaned while eating it. God knows I have searched for them for years. Now I am starting to believe I dreamed it. Story 45. My mother's starch and bunga soup. I didn't know what she put in it that made it so delicious. I've only eaten it a few times, maybe twice, but both times I was sent to sensory and culinary heaven. Actually, I'll change my answer to anything my mother makes. Story 46. I rode my bicycle 150 kilometers in the Thai heat. When I arrived at my destination, I ordered a coconut ice cream milkshake. It was the best moment ever. Story 47. A New York strip and some Rocky Mountain oysters at our favorite steakhouse, the Wolf Lodge. However, it recently burned down. Story 48. Roast suckling pig in Spain. The restaurant had a gimmick in that it could be cleanly cut with a plate. Story 49. A bowl of lomi, Filipino egg noodles with thick soup, from a hut off the side of the road. Literally one of the best things you could eat on a cold, rainy day. I am so sad I cannot remember the name of that place. Story 50. My dad created a chili recipe when I was a child. After he died, I inherited the recipe along with my sister. I tweaked it a little to my taste because he created the recipe during chemotherapy treatment and overcompensated on spices. I perfected the recipe 3 years ago and still love it to this day. Story 51. Garlic bread from the old mamas on Dale Mabry in Tampa cannot be duplicated. Even the new mamas cannot recreate it. Anyone from Tampa knows it was more than just garlic bread. It was magic. Story 52. One of my wife's friends makes a vegan sticky toffee pudding. It is very good. Story 53. A local Belgian restaurant where my husband and I have a fancy date night twice a year serves braised short ribs with leek mashed potatoes and creamy Brussels sprouts. It is one of the most delicious dinners ever, and I never order anything different because I know I will have fear of missing out if I do not choose that dish. Story 54. Ikura. My first time introduced to it, I was thinking, this is something from Fear Factor. That first bite was incredible. To this day, it is the most delicious thing I have ever eaten. Actually, that includes all sushi. Story 55. Focaccia, crispy but light at the same time, salty, oily, and hot in Genoa. I have never had this stateside or replicated it yet. Story 56. A classic margherita pizza with fresh mozzarella, basil, and flawless dough is the tastiest thing I have ever had. Easy yet memorable. How about you? Story 57. After swimming, rowing, hiking, and climbing for 8 to 10 hours, we got back to the cabin. My buddy's dad had gotten a deer and cooked the backstrap over the fire. He is an excellent cook, runs a restaurant now, and we always looked forward to those meals. I grew up mostly eating venison as red meat, and honestly, I don't really like it, but backstrap is something else. We also had some steelhead. He had flown us out to a lake in the middle of nowhere, and it was beautiful. It was the longest and most exhausting day ever. We got kind of drunk and feasted. I feel like that was the peak meal of my life. I was the most sated, empty-headed, relaxed, and content I have ever been. I did overdo it, though. It was me, 5 friends I have known since middle or high school, my buddy's dad, and his young stepchild. We were all cramped in a tiny cabin. I was on the top bunk. It was late, and we were pretty intoxicated. I loosely remember groaning about how full I was, Then every minute or two reaching down below with a fork I kept in the bunk to grab another piece of meat. I could not be stopped, and it was glorious. We get the whole group together, hopefully once a year, and that night always comes up. I don't know how much was the environment, me going all out all day and ravenous, or if the food was just that good. Some combination, I'm sure, but that was the best meal ever. Story 58. I had a sub from a local pizza joint. It was so flavorful, I pined for it. I tried it years later. It never hit me that way again. Story 59. It might be simple, but I had a cheeseburger at a random Greasy Spoon diner in Scranton, Pennsylvania, about 20 years ago that I still think about. It was your run-of-the-mill cheeseburger, but something about it still sticks with me after all this time. Story 60. My mom's deep-fried pork chops. I never ate eggs growing up, except when they were used to coat the pork chops. Story 61. My group received the chef's treatment at a restaurant last year. They served us bone marrow cooked and still in the bone. It was divine. Story 62. Super fresh shrimp was on the top layer of the shrimp boat coming in. I drove home and cooked it. Even buying from the same place, I never got ones that tasty again. Story 63. I am having a hard time deciding between a real Philadelphia cheesesteak like Mama's Pizzeria in Philadelphia on Belmont Avenue. Some of the best are the smaller places and literally melt in your mouth. Stuffed green peppers. An Australian meat pie, not a shepherd's pie. Story 64. A muffuletta sandwich in New Orleans. The fried oysters there were excellent as well. An unforgettable focaccia with ricotta in Rapallo, Italy. I had this fabulous meal somewhere in northern Italy. The noodles were laid out over the tables, drying, when we arrived and the shop was just opening. No menu, they just served us pappardelle and lamb shank and more. Also unforgettable. I can't name just one. Story 65. After I was home 2 weeks after colon surgery, my daughter baked a Marie Callender's chicken pot pie. I had not eaten real food in nearly a month. I existed on intravenous liquids, then clear liquids, then near liquids. That pot pie was the best meal of my entire life. Story 66. Deep-fried pork chops, collard greens with bacon, black-eyed peas, and coleslaw at Josie's Soul Food Bistro in a small town in Florida. They only served sweet tea, and everyone except me was dressed to the nines from Sunday church. It was years ago, and I still remember every bite. I am not a religious person, but that food was a religious experience all the same. Story 67. This summer features frizzelle with raw olive oil, tomato, basil, and onion. Literally summer in a bite. In winter, 16-hour slow-cooked pork ribs with handmade honey barbecue sauce. I have never eaten that much meat in one sitting before trying them. As a drink, this apple and mint juice. Story 68. The first time I had blackened mahi-mahi was absolutely amazing. It is my favorite fish. I followed it up with pumpkin soup I had on a cruise. My mouth had a party. Story 69. Decades ago, I was on a ship in Southeast Asia. I cannot remember which port call this was, but we received oranges delivered with other supplies to the ship. They were somewhat greenish and blemished, but I had one and it was the best orange I have ever had by a large margin. I went down to the mess deck to get more, and the entire crew was there eating those oranges as if it was their job. 25 years ago, and I will never forget it. Story 70. I was on a trip to an airport in a city a few hours away. We were coming from a small town where the population almost halved when we left. We had been drinking the night before, and I was a bit hungover. On the way, there was a convenience store. I stopped in, and in the pie warmer was a pie in an unlabeled plastic bag. All it said was minced meat and cheese. There was no branding or ingredients listed. To say the pie was delicious was an understatement. Also, my grandmother's cookies were very good too. Story 71. Oh man, I cannot pick just one. Shrimp Mona Lisa from Cafe Amici. A burger and fries from Old City Public House. A world-famous hot dog from New Way Lunch. A porterhouse steak from Teller's. A pastrami on rye with mustard from Katz's, with a side of pickles and Dr. Brown's black cherry soda. Pizza from Grimaldi's. My wife's chicken with adobo seasoning, roasted in the oven. Actually, a lot of dishes my wife makes, but that was the first one that came to mind. Story 72. I had always thought it was a strange dish to eat, tried it, and it completely amazed me. Story 73. My mom's pot roast before she married my salt-hating stepdad. Love the man, but he likes bland food. It was always seasoned just right and had loads of carrots and potatoes in it. When I was in college, she always knew without asking that I would want her to make it when I got home. Story 74. The brisket at Franklin Barbecue in Austin, Texas not only lived up to the hype but completely surpassed it. It was heavenly, salty, fatty meat with gelatin. Story 75. A Wendy's chocolate frosty. There is just something about it that tastes amazing. I am clearly not a foodie. Story 76. The first time I ever had General Tso's chicken, I was maybe 11 years old. It was life-changing bliss, euphoria, like your first orgasm. Story 77. My grandmother was an excellent cook. She could whip up anything from scratch. I stayed with her one summer, played outside all day, and came back hungry. She said she would make goulash. It involved pasta and cheese, and it was the best thing I have ever eaten. I have never been able to mimic it. Story 78. There used to be a doner kebab restaurant in Ankara that used charcoal instead of gas. It was so good I ate two the first time I had them. Story 79. My brother's homemade polar bear stew. I was invited to my brother's coffee a coffee get-together, when his youngest started school. It's an old custom in Greenland, where I come from, since kids surviving long enough to go to school was considered worthy of celebrating back in the old days. The tradition lived on because who doesn't love a happy celebration and good food? You start at 6 o'clock in the morning, opening your home to your guests. Then it goes on all day, where people can just drop by to celebrate when they have the time. People come and go all day. Breakfast, coffee, tea, snacks, lunch, beer and soda, afternoon coffee and tea with cake, dinner with multiple courses, and various kinds of alcohol are served until you shut down the party around midnight. My brother and his partner had made all sorts of delicious things for everyone to enjoy, and I tried his polar bear stew. It was very delicious and tasted like a cross between the best beef you can get and the most tasty, juicy game meat you can hunt. So if you ever go to Greenland and get the chance, experience a traditional Greenlandic coffee. You get to meet the local people, and you get to try the most delicious foods. I can recommend it. Story 80. In 1998, I enjoyed the most perfect mushroom and truffle risotto at a tiny restaurant in an alleyway near the Pantheon in Rome. Every risotto after that has tasted like disappointment. Story 81. I had a low-country filet mignon 20 years ago that I still dream of. It was seared quickly on the outside. A slit was cut in it, and it was stuffed with crab meat and Roquefort cheese, then finished in a convection oven. Story 82. Chopped smoked pork shoulder barbecue sandwich with chopped cabbage and a vinegar-based barbecue sauce. No sweet additives. Best thing there is. Story 83. Iskander from the Bursa restaurant in Ankara, Turkey, in the 1980s. I have been chasing that flavor for decades, and no Iskander has come close. Story 84. Fresh abalone, closely followed by fresh lion's mane. Just sautéed with butter, salt, and pepper, literally a dream. Story 85. My grandmother's caramel shortbread. The shortbread was crunchy and had a snap unlike most others I have tried. The chocolate was thick, and it was proper caramel, not the caramel-flavored paste that most commercially available ones use. Also, the salted caramel fudge from the Asda Extra Special range is very addictive. Story 86. For me, nothing will ever beat homemade French fries, hand-cut and fried in olive oil in a pan, dipped in fried egg yolk. My grandmother was a master cook. She made many delicious dishes, but her fried eggs with fries will always be my favorite. Story 87. My own cooking experiments improved once I gave myself permission to fail. For example, honey vanilla bean gelato with chocolate shavings and a tiny sprinkle of white pepper. The pepper seemed to melt the honey and chocolate in my mouth, even though they were actually still frozen. It was amazing. That and my mother's cooking. She received marriage proposals from delivery men just from the smells of her cooking. Story 88. We had some ramen at Kanoya in Dubai. We arrived about 10 minutes before the kitchen closed, so we all picked random dishes without thinking. It was by far the best ramen we have ever had, and we still talk about it today. I wish we remembered what we picked though. Story 89. Both New York City pizza from a tiny store on a corner and the street vendor hot dog with mustard and special relish. Also, the best sandwich made my mouth water. Virginia Beach, North Carolina. Fresh French bread, crunchy on the outside, soft inside, fresh turkey slices, avocado spread with herbs, lettuce, tomato so fresh and juicy, and just a hint of balsamic vinaigrette. Yummy. Story 90. A chicken corn dog my friend gave me because he did not want it. It was 2018, and I searched the city for it but could never find it. I think they used cake batter. Story 91. My aunt's cookies and cream Swiss roll cake at Christmas when I was a child. I am gluten-free now, and there is no way to recreate it. Story 92. Sally Ibiza in New Haven, specifically the tomato pie, is what I imagine heaven tastes like. Story 93. In recent memory, I made an aged cheddar and pickle sandwich with stone-ground mustard on homemade peasant bread that was exquisite. Going back to childhood, I had some baby back ribs at a high-end German restaurant that I still fondly reminisce about 45 years later. Like nothing I have ever had since, they melted like butter in my mouth and, most importantly, were not covered in barbecue sauce. They were truly amazing. Story 94. It's a three-way tie because my mother was an excellent Southern cook. Key lime pie, condensed milk, key limes from the key lime tree in our yard, meringue topping, hush puppies, blobs of cornmeal with diced onions and celery, fried in the same iron frying pan with the leftover grease from the fried fish. I have failed to duplicate them. Pecan pie, made with fresh Georgia pecans. The filling recipe is missing, and no family member has it. I have eaten pecan pie in various parts of the United States and have never found a slice that could come close to the heavenly pie of my mother's. I wish I could visit heaven, get that recipe, and come back. Story 95. I was in Trieste, Italy in the late 1980s. We went into a Chinese restaurant. It was like any other Chinese place in the world with traditional decor. I ordered a seafood Szechuan dish that had mussels, scallops, shrimp, prawns, crab, and baby squid. It was the most delicious thing I have ever had. I was deployed in the Navy and had not been home for months. That hour was a strange slice of home, but in a Chinese restaurant. I remember being jolted back into reality when we left and were back on the street in Trieste, Italy. 40 years later, I still remember that feeling. Story 96. I had some squid ink pasta with octopus and lobster sauce. I would eat that every day if it were not so expensive. Story 97. The pizza at a place in Los Angeles called La Barbera's, which closed long ago, was to die for. It was a family-owned restaurant. My God, that pizza, imbued with fennel seeds, cheese, Italian sausage, onions, black olives, tomatoes, and green peppers, was the best. I have never found anything that comes close. It makes my mouth water just thinking about it. It was a dark day when the owners retired and a strip mall replaced the property. There are forums online where people still discuss La Barbera's pizza. Story 98. Hands down, a filet mignon made of bison. Unbelievably rich and tasty, unbelievably tender. I had it prepared Pittsburgh style, which is kind of charred on the outside yet pink on the inside. The place we went for dinner specialized in bison. Bison burgers, bison steaks, bison au jus. They even had buffalo meatloaf. Story 99. I went to Paris for one of my birthdays in the early 2000s. I was taken to a restaurant where I had rabbit prepared 3 ways, one of them confit. It was the only time I ever let myself eat rabbit. It was outstanding. I wish I could remember the name of the restaurant. Story 100. A serpaczek, a cheese-filled donut. One morning in Katowice, Poland. It was simple but perfect. The donut was freshly fried with a crispy texture on the outside, a soft and pillowy inside, and a filling similar to soft cheesecake or cannoli. It did not even need powdered sugar. I still think about it. Story 101. Random slice of blueberry and Oreo cheesecake. I went on a European trip years ago with my ex-wife. We were still together back then. When we were in Prague, we came across a weekend farmer's market where a woman and her daughter were selling different pastries and cakes. It was so good that we stopped by for more later that same day and again the next day before leaving. It was either that cheesecake or mole with chicken in Oaxaca. Story 102. My grandfather makes lemon cream shrimp pasta that is absolutely delicious. You caramelize the shrimp and then stew the heads in a separate pot. They have a really good flavor, so you cook the pasta in the same water used for the shrimp heads and then use that water again to add to the cream sauce. It is incredibly rich and very flavorful. Story 103. As a British person living in the United States, I had a few days in London last year, and that first bacon sandwich made me cry. Story 104. I cannot pick a specific dish, but everything I ate when I was in southern China was delicious. I cannot find similar Chinese food in the United States. Story 105. Butter cake at Mastro's Steakhouse in New York City. Imagine you are very deeply drunk, and the waitress presents it as butter cake. It is the best thing you have ever eaten, despite the fact that you just had a $45 piece of steak. Story 106. Veal stuffed with pesto in a strawberry brandy sauce. It was divine. 20 years have passed since that restaurant closed. Story 107. Cassata and pear gelato in Milan, Italy. It was so good that I ate a cone and walked across town immediately afterward to get another bowl because it was our last day there and I expected I would never get it again. Truly the best thing I have ever eaten, hands down. Story 108. The fritters they used to make in New Orleans Square in Disneyland, located behind the train stop, are no longer available. Now it is beignet, and they are just not the same. Story 109. Marie Callender's Restaurant, Orange County, California. Fresh, uncooked boysenberries in a shortbread crust covered with a light glaze that was available only in June decades ago. Story 110. My husband is an excellent cook. He makes an excellent tri-tip. It is always delicious, but one of the first times he made it, it literally melted in my mouth. Story 111. The first time I ever had a medium steak off the grill, or maybe the first time I had country fried chicken at Babe's Chicken Dinner House. Story 112. The Wiener Schnitzel and the goulash my mother used to make, and the pierogi my grandmother made. Oh, how I miss them and their cooking. Story 113. 2 times I had a chocolate cheesecake that was just out of this world. I also had a cinnamon pecan ice cream that was phenomenal. Story 114. A breakfast dish from Annapolis, crab hash, is like fancy corned beef with crab meat instead of corned beef. Large pieces of lump crab meat, bacon, home fries, asparagus, and red peppers are topped with an egg, spicy hollandaise, and a generous amount of Old Bay seasoning. Perfection in a bowl. Story 115. My ex used to make really delicious macaroni and cheese. I bought the same ingredients, but it just does not taste the same. Story 116. That's a tough one. I'm going to say the brisket sandwich from Elsie's Barbecue in Kansas City, Missouri, but ask me another day and my answer might change. Honorable mention to the pho at a little family-owned restaurant near me and a piece of prime rib I had at Ye Old Steakhouse in Knoxville, Tennessee. Story 117. More than 24 hours before and after giving birth with no food. A bowl of cornflakes with sugar and milk was amazing. Story 118. I was in Phuket, Thailand in the summer of 2004. We did not know where to eat, so we asked our driver. He took us to a place along the water that was basically a cement slab with a roof. They cooked whatever they caught that day. We had fish in green curry and papaya salad. It was the best Thai food I have ever had or will ever have. I do not know if that place survived the tsunami a few months later, but I hope it did. We heard that our driver did not make it. Story 119. My grandmother made this amazing chicken soup about 15 years ago that my mother and I have never been able to replicate, and I still crave it. Story 120. Bacon fried toast when I was in my early 20s. One of my roommates on a few occasions made a batch of sliced bread fried in the perfect amount of bacon fat. I recall thinking it was the greatest thing I had ever had, and nothing has matched it yet. Truffle flavor. I have never had actual truffles, but truffle-flavored chips, hummus, and cheese have all been fantastic. Fresh baked specialty bakery donuts. Story 121. Sfogliatella in Naples, Italy. Bitterballen in Amsterdam. A hot fudge brownie sundae from our local custard place. My mother's recipe for hot beef sandwiches. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.